let's get started then. Thank you for being here. Today I'm going to talk about my experience migrating Angular applications. But before getting into that, I would like to tell a small story. A bit more than 10 years ago, I attended my first tech conference. It was 2013. It was Devoxx Belgium, in Belgium. And at the time, I attended a talk about front-end. Just to put back some context, in 2013, AngularJS had a couple of years. React was brand new. Yeah, it's feel a bit strange. And the speaker at the time was talking, okay, you can build your new front end. You're going to add feature. You're going to solve bug. But one thing you will never do is upgrade your dependency. Yeah, feels crazy to me. But today I want to show you that it should never be the case, especially with Angular. We have the tools to do that, and I will guide you through that. And if you want more info after that, you can come to me. So my name is Loïc Magnette. I'm a senior developer for a Belgian consultancy company called Oniryx. I'm also the proud dad of a little 3-year-old girl, and I'm one of the co-organizers of the Belgian Java user group back in Belgium. You have all my social networks, and it keeps growing because people are leaving Twitter, so I need to find another way to grab people. And we can start a journey then. So if you want to migrate an application with Angular, the very first step you should do is to go to update.angular.io. And it will try to guide you to how you can migrate your application. So you will start by choosing your current version, and you should choose the version you want to go, but usually, or basically, Angular will stop you going more than one major version at a time. And trust me, that's a good thing. Because I tried at some point, I did migrate from 10 to 11, and I was like, oh, there is that warning, but I'm pretty sure it's going to go fine when I go to 12. I went to 12, and instead of a few warnings, I got a bunch of errors. I couldn't figure out what was going on. So go just one version at a time. That's the best way to say, okay, is everything working? Yes. Okay, now I can push that. You can even go to production because it's working. And then I will worry about the next version after that. But the very first step that Angular recommends is to check your node version. Because and my clicker decided to die, but oh no, I clicked somewhere there. Depending of your Angular version, there is different version for Node, for TypeScript, for XJS, for a lot of things. And usually the most bothering part is Node.js because you install your version of Node.js, and then you're like, oh, I'm migrating, I need another version, or maybe not. And I would recommend not doing by hand. Use tools. There is tools to do that. There is Node Version Manager if you just do Node. But if you do different languages, just like me, I do a lot of Java, ASDF is maybe a good tool because it lets you switch between different runtime for different languages. So you can use it for Node, you can use it for Java, you can use it probably for Kotlin and things like that. And when you have that, you're at that moment ready to do the migration. And if you look at the Angular guide, they're going to say to you, just do ng update. Look easy enough. When you run it, it will show you a bunch of dependency that needs to be updated using the ng update. So the next step is usually to do ng update with, here there's only one package, but you can put more than one, and say, okay, I'm going to migrate those things. And that's where I need to explain a bit about ng update. Because ng update is a schematic. And as Angular developer, we're really used to using schematics. For one good reason, we use it all the time because you use ng-new when you create a new project. You use ng-generate to create your components, services, and things like that. But there's a few other schematics that we don't use that much. The add to add some dependency, usually, or in my experience, the only time I use the ng add is to add material, Angular material, because the other one will use npmi. And there is the famous ng update now. And what's interesting with ng update is to look on what's happening when you run that. So of course it's documented in a page that not that much developer go to see, basically. But in quick, what does ngupdate is going to look in your package.json, look at all your dependency, and check the package.json of this dependency and see, is there a key for ngupdate there? If it's there, you're going to run what's behind that ngupdate key. If there is nothing, it's going to say, I have nothing to do here. So usually, if you did properly your ngupdate, you hope that result. That's finished and easy. And that's where you're wondering why this guy has 45 minutes to talk. It just did that in 5 minutes. It's because we all have dependencies. And usually when you think first at your dependency, you think something like that. Oh, I have some effects now? Basically something well organized, properly designed with all your dependency. And that's probably right for the first month of your new project. But after a while, when you have a big application, you might end up with something like this. And that's usually what's happening to every application, whether or not you're trying to do the right thing. For one good reason, there is different developer working on your app, and everybody has his own preferences. And somebody going to say, I want to use that component, and this one will say, oh no, I prefer that library, it's better. And you end up with like 3 or 4 different library for components. And I'm talking what happened in my experience. There was, I think, 3 different library for components. And it means you could use 3 different components to use a button. That's totally overkill. So the first really thing you should do is use the npm ls-all and see your full dependency tree. At least you know what's in your project, because at some point, even if you work for a year on this project, you probably don't know what's in there. You probably missed something, or you might wonder, okay, what is this dependency? Why do we need that? And when you reach that point, you should start cleaning up and say, okay, that dependency, I don't remember, I don't find anywhere we were using. Let's get rid of it. Because it's way easier for anybody to migrate less dependency. If you don't have to migrate something, great, avoid it. Don't do work you don't want to do. Be a bit lazy, basically. So that's really the first thing you should do. The next thing is to look at how outdated is your project. To do that, there is npm outdated. You can run it. It will give you your current version, the max version allowed based on the server in your package.json, and then the latest version. The next thing not to do is to take the latest version and replace everything in your package.json. That's the best way to break everything in 5 seconds or more. So it's just to give you, okay, how outdated is my project? How far do I need to go? Because probably there is dependency that don't need to be that or you're not that back on it. You still can work with that. And then you're gonna play like a cat. Why do I'm talking about a cat here? It's basically that's how I felt when I was upgrading, because you do the ngupdate, you say, okay, I'm going to 12 from 12 to 13. The ngupdate works, and then you run an npmi and say, oh, this dependency does not support Angular 13. Okay, what's the version for Angular 13? You change that, and you do npmi, and then you got another dependency that doesn't say, oh, I need that version, so you need to update that. And basically, it's like a cat playing with a bowl of wool. It's pulling on the thread and until there is no ball anymore. That's basically what you're going to do. You're going to try to update everything just because your dependency are not supporting ngupdate. That's basically it. And when you do an upgrade, you might have a diff file like this. And you see that I've just part of my screen. If you look on the right, you can see there is a lot more. And that's not the worst case I got. So you will see a lot of change in your package JSON because you need to update every dependency that's depending on Angular, basically, or TypeScript, or basically anything you use there. And small trick, what I did when I was updating, I have basically a script with those things. One, that I'm removing all the node modules. I'm trying to update, so I don't want those old modules. I'm cleaning the Angular cache. If you're in most recent versions, there is a cache for Angular, so I don't want any cache. And then I remove my package log JSON because it's going to stop me from updating. It's going to say, that's fixed there. I want you to keep that version. It's not the case when you want to update, so I get rid of it and then just do an npmi. And you're going to loop on that. That's why I have a script to do that, because I don't want to type it every time. But basically, it's just cleaning everything, trying to install when you've changed, and if everything worked, great. If not, just update the right dependency and try again. It's not the best experience, but that's how it is. One thing that you might encounter doing migration is API migration, because you use dependency, and those dependencies can change their APIs. In my case, I was happy and really lucky because we were using Firebase, and Firebase changed the API but kept a compatibility version. So I just had to change the import to say, okay, I'm using compatibility now. At some point, I'm going to need to move from that, but for now, I can still use it, and it's great. But if you have somebody that's less careful with breaking the API, you might have to go through your code and say, okay, what's changed? What do I need to change? I had that for another application where basically from one version to the other, they went from, we have a specific module for Angular to now we don't use, you just need to use web component, please find your way to use it. And like, nice guys, thank you, but you don't do the work apparently because I need to do that. And then I end up in the real problems. The first one is basically I had NGX Translate that was supporting Angular 13.0, and then supporting Angular 14.0, except I was using Angular 13.2. And so basically it was trying to tell me, I cannot work with that. You know, that .2 is too important. I cannot use, I need the right version. And there was no version for NGX Translate specific for that. Luckily, I use NGX Translate quite a bit, so I know that usually they don't break a lot of things. And yes, I'm using NGX Translate because I'm in Belgium. And in Belgium, you need to have French, Dutch, German, and English. So you need translation. You cannot work without that. So I was really familiar with that and was like, I never had something breaking with NGX Translate from version to version. So I followed a wise little green guy, you might know him, and I used the -- force. So I basically did an npmi -- force for one good reason, because I knew that was the only dependency blocking me from achieving this next level of Angular, the next version. And this was really the only one, and I knew NGX Translate. I knew usually nothing breaks, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be fine. In 99% of the time, you shouldn't use that if you have a warning, except if you really know, okay, I can try that. I'm really sure it should work, but you should not use that, basically. But that was an easy fix, and I knew that I was stuck between 13 and 14. My goal was 17 at the time. I was like, I'm pretty sure that going forward, I won't have that problem anymore. That was the easy part. The next part were a bit like this. I felt basically stuck on the beach, wondering how I can go back to water and migrate. Two of those problems look a bit like this. I was looking for a version and couldn't find it. I was like, that's an issue. How am I supposed to go on with that? And those problems have had really different solutions. The first one is basically I was using a dependency provide me a lot of components, and from one version to the other, one component went missing. I was like, a bit strange, what's happening there? Went to look into the documentation, and so, yeah, we dropped that component. I don't think we should keep it. It's too much bother for us. I was like, that's really not nice for developers. Then I realized that they basically use another component from another library and wrap it up for their own use. So I was like, let's just try to swap it out. I'm going to use this other component from somewhere and see if everything works. And at first, the npmi worked. When I do the serve, everything was working, so I felt great. But my project had one big failure. There was no test. No test at all. So I test a bit manually and looks great. And a couple of days later, I got a colleague calling me, say, you know, you broke that page. I was like, what? I didn't even know that page exists at first. And second time, I thought like, how did I break it? Oh yeah, we're using that component. Okay, that component I know. That's the one I swapped the dependency for. I was like, yeah, but basically it doesn't work. And why I didn't spot it? Basically, HTML is really great. If you put tags in your HTML or property on your tag on HTML and it doesn't know it, it doesn't tell anything about it. You say, I don't know, I don't care. So you have no way to check it except if you have tested that, okay, this component is properly rendered, can I find everything, yes or no? So we were lucky enough that we could basically rewrite, adapt a bit the component, and just, I think in one day, the component was back there, properly working. So that's not that big of a change, but still, it can be really dangerous if you have no tests, so no safety net for you in those cases. And then the other one was from Angular 10 to 11. So based on my title, the title of my talk, that was just the first try to migrate. And I got the dependency, and basically I was like, I cannot find the next version. Looking through NPM, no trace of another version. And I'll say, okay, but it looks like it comes from GitHub, so I'm going to go to GitHub. And I end up on that message. That's really, really nice when you're like, okay, I need to migrate, but this dependency, there is nobody supporting it anymore. And I really need to migrate it, and my server is basically telling me I cannot use it because it's not supported. So I say, okay, there is two options for me. The first one is I clone this repository, create a new one, and then migrate this dependency to Angular 11, 12, 13, 14, and you see where I'm going. And I still need to migrate my application. I was like, I don't have time for that, and especially if there is other dependency just like that, it's going to take me way too long to do that. So I use the most powerful tool for any developer. I use the copy-paste. I basically took the code from the repo, pasted it in my project, and check, is it working? Yeah, it's working. So basically, it's just the server blocking me. Basically, that's it. I look at the license, because you shouldn't copy-paste from GitHub without looking at the license. That's way too dangerous, or you feel really adventurous, I would say. But the license were really okay to me for me to use it, so I was like, okay. And looking through the code, I was like, when I have time, I can go back to this piece of code I've added, and I could probably remove at least half of it, because there is other library to do that, or they are based on the library, so I can directly use it. But that was not really the nicest experience, because you should be really careful when you choose a dependency, see, okay, how well is it maintained? Because basically, when I saw the message, it's been, I think, at least 2 years since the last commit was done on that repository. So that was really just waiting for to happen to anybody. And then I'd end up on the worst problem I've got in my experience. I was migrating for Angular 14 to 15. The npmi works perfectly. I was like, yes, a 5-minute migration, great. And then try to serve and get a strange error talking about post CSS. I was like, okay, what's post CSS? I don't think I've seen it in the package JSON. What's happening? So first thing, I look in my, using npmls, look for post CSS in my project. And yeah, it was there. Does anybody see an issue here? Because I didn't see it at first. No? Yeah, what's about the last row? Yeah.
Not only the last row, even in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
There are different mixed versions.
Yeah, and that's for you. That's exactly what's happening. I have two different versions for the same dependency. And I didn't find it at first because you look through that and there's a bunch of lines, and if you don't look carefully, you cannot find it. So basically, I have that problem, exactly. I was like, okay, that's worrying. I spot one. Do I have any other? Because no, I'm worried, really worried from that. So I'll look into the npm documentation and find this comment, npm find dupes. Does anybody know that comment here? Okay, every time I ask this question, I feel better about myself because nobody knows about this apparently. So these comments will go through your project and look if there is issue between two dependencies. And when I run it on my project, it was quite, I would say, obvious there was an issue. But without that tool, good luck finding it. So I was like, okay, I have two different versions for the same dependency, basically a transitive dependency, not my dependency directly. What can I do? First step, say, okay, who's importing that, and can I upgrade one or the other? And unlucky for me, I couldn't. Basically, one was still blocked on the previous version of Angular. The other one was stuck on this my current version of Angular. So no way to fix it easily. One thing you should know about me is I'm basically a Java developer that ended up doing Angular. So my reflex were from Java and was like, if I'm in Java, I can exclude a dependency, a transitive dependency. I can do that. I was like, let's try to do that. And then I realized that you cannot exclude any dependency in npm. That's something that's not existing. I was like, okay, I feel like I'm stuck here. I look back into the documentation and find this thing called npm dedupe. Never heard of it, and apparently none of my colleagues heard of it ever. And it's working quite nicely, but you cannot figure it out by yourself. So just a small example, I have a dependency tree quite simple with dependency A that have two dependencies, B and C, and they both have a dependency D, and just like my use case, with conflicting version, or not the same version. When you run the dedupe thing, it's going to try to move the dependency upper in the tree, and so fixing this version. Because when npm does the install and use the dependency, it goes through a breadth first search, not a depth first search. So it means it's going to find the first version there and don't bother about anything else. So that's what does the dedupe. That's a powerful tool when you have that issue, but I would really prefer to have something really clear on it can happen and how we can fix it. So basically, I ran the command, and I went too far there, and my problem was fixed. And the funny part, I only got this error for that version. Afterward, never used that dedupe anymore. Yeah? Yeah.
How do you know if the B dependency is compatible with the last version?
That's one issue. Basically, what does the dedupe is going to change your package log JSON. So you can go in your package log and check what version is there. And I presume you can even change that version and say, okay, I want that version specifically. So you still have some choice there, but that's not the ideal solution, in my opinion. So I never got this issue, and a couple of months ago for this same talk, but in another conference, I want to try it and show everybody how it's happening. And the funny part is I cannot reproduce it anymore because one of those dependencies has been updated, and they fixed the issue basically. So it was being at the wrong place at the wrong time for me. But I think that's really interesting because I think conflicting dependency is something we don't think that much about until we got some real issue there. Just for information, when you do an npmi, there is an option to run the dedupe automatically for you. Personally, I don't use it because I prefer to know what's happening in my project. And from time to time, I just run and find dupes and say, okay, is there anything there? No? Okay, I feel okay with that. But I think I'm doing Angular since Angular 5. That was the first time I ever encountered this issue. So that's not something you're gonna find every day in your code, but you should know about it at least in case you get something strange and you might say, okay, what's happening here? Do I have this issue? One of the things you could find, and we're quite lucky on that, is styling, because when you migrate from one version to other, the components might change and your styling might break because that's not obvious. In our case, we just got 3 components with a slightly bad look, but we could fix it like in 5 minutes. But if you're using Angular material, you might end up on that. Basically, with material 3, they changed a lot of things with material, and they try to help every developer. So there is a command to a schematic to migrate automatically your Angular material design. It works to some level, because the issue is when you style a component, you can do it like 10 different ways, because CSS allows you to do a lot of things, and developers cannot find a way to migrate every use case you have in mind. That's way too complicated. I chat with someone from a totally different environment. They do front-end components for Java application. And we talk about that and say we have exactly the same issue because all the developers using our library are styling it so deeply and with so much complexity, we cannot do migration for them. I have a colleague that had this issue, and basically they had to restyle the whole application because the styling they applied was so deep and so intricate for the application that they cannot use it just like it. So if you're using Angular material, just be careful. That might be a real problem for you. Another thing is the linter, because until Angular 10, when you use a linter, you're supposed to use tslint. But going forward, you need to use ESLint. So you need to do the migration. In our case, we get a worse experience than that because the tslint configuration, I think, was not run in the last 2 years at least because it was not working at all. So basically, I took a clean tslint script saying, okay, I'm going to go back to the basic because I want to be sure. And then I run all the schematics to migrate to ESLint. So there's one to install the schematic for ESLint and one to do migration. And usually if you have a tslint properly configured, that's not an issue. It does it properly. You might lose some configuration there, but you can probably find the same thing for ESLint. And that's where we say, okay, now we are Angular 17 at the time, no Angular 18. And you could feel like, good, I have achieved my goal. The problem is, your code is looking just like this. You have some brand new shiny stuff, but you still have old stuff in your code. And you should take care of that. because there is probably deprecated code there, because just Oniryx.js by itself has changed along the way, and there's probably deprecated method there. And you should find a way to do it and not go look through your code file by file, hoping to find something. That's not really efficient. And there is a small ESLint plugin to do that. This plugin is going to check if you have any deprecated code for method in your TypeScript. So that's really useful. To give you an example, and I'm going to put it in red, it's going to be easier. We get a lot of subscribe because we use observable. And subscribe changed the signature with some deprecated stuff. And basically, we had a lot of that. I changed the configuration because by default it's error. I put it in warning because probably you don't have time right away to say, okay, I'm going to go to all the warning on my project and fix it by hand. I know that when we develop projects, we need to deliver those projects. We need to put it in production. So probably you don't have time to say, please hold. I'm going to take a week to fix all the warning because in a way it doesn't break your application. So you should just be aware of it, and when everything is fixed, maybe then switch it back to error because no, it should be an error. You should not use that code. But until they're still there, warning is probably the best way to do it. And then we got a lot of to-dos left because Angular has evolved a lot in the couple last versions. So we have those things to do. Use standalone components because we are still using modules at that point. All the input binding when you have a resolver or things like that. All the new front control that has been introduced with Angular 17. All the signals that are coming now. And we're like, okay, that's a lot of work. The first thing we changed was the new control flow because there is a schematic to do that. And the schematic works really great. You can run it in 5 minutes, it's migrated. You need probably to go back to all the change to just see, is there any optimization I can do there, or I can figure out something. But it's really easy to do, and that's probably the first one you should do because it's easy to do, and you will probably gain some performance on your application without doing anything. So that's a great one. The other one that I finished a couple of weeks ago was the standalone component. Again, there is a schematic. But if, like in my case, you have a large application, first, don't run the schematic on the root of your project. Just go on some module first, because otherwise, you're going to probably end up with a lot of red in your console and not a lot of solution there. And even with the schematic, the whole thing is not that automatic. You still need to do something by hands and will take times. When I say take times, it doesn't mean it will take you weeks or months. In my case, it took me 2 days. But still think about it because that's a bit more complex. So it brings us back to the schematics. Angular provides a lot of schematics to do migration. In Angular 19, there will be one to migrate all the input to signal input and to all the view child to view child, but with signals. So it will be done automatically for you. But when it ends up not working, you might end up in a position where you're like, how can I fix that? So you should probably really know, okay, what's supposed to do that schematic and what's the expected result for me? Because in my case, I was like, okay, the schematic should remove all the modules. At some point, it was like, no, it's not removing my modules. Why? And I figured out that there was roots configured, all the roots are configured through the modules, and those roots were not really well configured. So I had to clean up all the roots before I could remove all those modules. But again, you should not do a big bang in your application. And if those schematics are not enough, the best solution is just go step by step. If you change a component and you see it's not standalone, just adding standalone true at the top of it, then remove it from the module and look, everything is working. That's not that much work. And that way you're just migrating slowly but surely your application to the new standard, because with Angular 19, standalone component will be the standard. Module is going to disappear at some point, so you should probably go for that. I would like also to give you some tools, because updating and keeping your dependency updated should not be a full-time job, and you should not do that yourself. And to do that, there is two tools I would recommend: Dependabot and Renovate. They basically do the same stuff, except that Dependabot only works on GitHub. Renovate, you can use it on Azure DevOps, on GitHub, on a lot of things, so it's working. And what's going to do is look at your package.json, look for any updates, and say, okay, there is an update there. It can even create merge request for you, saying, okay, we should migrate this dependency. Don't let him run on everything every day or every time you change something. He's going to just give you too much things to do. But it will give you some idea of what can I update. If it's just patch version, you can probably say auto merge. I don't care because it's just a patch. But if it's something bigger, that's probably need to take a look. But it's a really great tool. But you should not use it to update Angular itself, because it's not working properly for that. So to end up this presentation, if you have three things to remember, the first thing is, please, when you migrate, one version at a time, not more, not less. That's the best way to upgrade. It gives you really milestone for you to check everything is working. If it's okay, yes, no. That's really a good way to work, because if you try to migrate from 10 to 18 and you don't look at what's happening between each version, probably your application won't work in 18. So go step by step. The other thing, and I'm not here to talk about testing and how great it should be, but please think about writing tests, because when you do migration, there are a safety net for you. They will not catch everything for you, but at least if you tested your application and you didn't find anything going wrong, and your test says everything is great, you feel a bit more confident saying, okay, let's push that. So I would say testing, certain person says testing is doubting. In this case, I would say is doubting. It's not testing would be really not smart, because you're changing probably a lot of things. The last thing should be plan your upgrades. It doesn't mean you need to just do the upgrades the next day of the release. I don't expect anybody next week migrating to Angular 19 when it's releasing. But just plan it, because if you say, oh, we need to migrate to this version of Angular, okay, oh, we don't have time, and then 2 months, 6 months pass, and instead of migrating one version, you have to migrate 10 versions, and that's way worse. You will not do it at that point. If you do it frequently, it will be easier, because you do it frequently. You know what's going to happen. You know the issue you might encounter, because you're used to that, and that way your project is up to date. I have colleagues where the client only tolerates to be one version before the current version of Angular, and that's totally okay. You don't need to be on the latest, but please have a policy on how you should upgrade. I'm going to end up here. Before leaving you space for questions, I would really appreciate if you took the time to rate the talk, give me feedback. It's always useful. I would really appreciate it. I will give time because I still see phone up there. Apparently the phone doesn't want to scan the QR. Okay. There is the link to the slides. If you want them, they're there. Feel free. If you have questions, that's the right time. And I have some stickers for you, so please come grab it. It's free. Thank you for your attention. And if you have questions, that's the right time.